a result of a contract win where they came in and told us we had 60 days to facilitate two remote sites, and it was 60 days starting 3 weeks ago. Okay, so we were stuck with having to bring up a couple of sites. We actually were able to bring them up in this infrastructure and meet our contract deadline and not lose money as a result of that. But I'll get to you in just a minute. Okay. But your original question about, is this better or worse? From a security operations perspective, with respect to what the security ops guys have to do in terms of vulnerability remediation, they love this whole concept, because every spinning disk that I take out of the environment is one less disk they have to go mess with in the event there is a problem. Okay, so yeah. Well, let me get this cover here.
I was just wondering how you've changed how you do backups, because it seems like you now have a huge single point of failure as far as
the infrastructure is all redundant. Okay, so basically we have multiple in the pilot infrastructure. That's one of the things we checked in the pilot infrastructure is redundancy. How do we make this thing redundant? Because yes, you're right. This thing relies heavily on your network. If your network goes down, people don't get to work. Okay, it relies heavily on your data center. Right, you lose your data center, smoking hole disaster. People are not going to work. So yeah, we basically built a lot of redundancy in this. So essentially, this entire infrastructure is actually spread between two data centers that were 3 miles apart. Okay, so even though we use the NetApp storage, so we were using the NetApp replication tools to be able to basically snap images across and put them in the other data center. We actually failed it over, so we failed from one data center to the other just to make sure that we could actually do it. With respect to backups, the user's data is still out on their home directories that we provided them. Okay, the only additional thing we had to worry about backing up was the profile information. It's stored in a separate set of storage, and so their normal data is backed up using the typical tape backup, snapshot, that sort of stuff. Their profile information, which was on a different storage array, was then stored over and replicated over to an offsite storage area. Yeah.
How has this new setup impacted your response metrics?
Well, since it's such a small window right now, it's of just 60 people essentially in the pilot. I don't know that it has at this point. Again, the idea behind what we've been doing is we haven't noticed any of the thin clients have not showed up anywhere in any of the incident reports, and primarily because most of the people who are actually using them we've got some guys out of our engineering organization that we work with on a pretty regular basis from an IT perspective, and then there's a lot of guys on the pilot were just IT guys, so guys that typically are a little bit more aware from a security perspective.
what's the load this put on both your local network and your WAN network?
Local network, it's not much of a load. It's ICA, so 75 to 150 kilobits per user, and then we throw the TCX stuff in there. It jumps up a little bit, but not much. Not enough to notice. Not enough that we decided we need to put this behind any kind of a QoS type solution. So, and then from the WAN perspective, I actually used the system while I was here. Okay, I've got a this thin client laptop, 1 gig of flash drive, 1 gig of RAM in it, wireless and all that jazz, and I can actually log into our wireless infrastructure, or into this infrastructure with this box from pretty much anywhere I can get a wireless signal, and then work in that environment. It depends, on a wireless connection, a choppy network, you'll notice it. It's not, remotely, it's not as the response is not as quick as doing. Being on the campus where all the hardware is at, but it's usable. It's very usable. So.
Okay. I'm sorry, you said that your ICA bandwidth was 75. What was it? 75 to 100 or so kilobits per second.
Mm-hmm.
What is your resolutions and screens?
I run mine on a 24-inch display, 1920 by 1080, whatever. Yeah, 1200 some. Big. But again. The video processing is done in the thin client, right? So, you're not pulling that much across the screen, across the wire.
I see, but you're not doing flash there.
No, no. Again, the flash is the ICA protocol. The flash, all of the stuff that's flash related and USB redirect type things are done on a separate protocol. That's the TCX protocol, that is proprietary to WISE, and there's a component in the virtual machine that grabs that stuff, strips it out, and sends it via a different protocol to the actual thin client itself. The thin client then renders that video. Okay, yeah.
So it's encapsulated in a sense?
Yeah. So,
I'm sorry,
no problem.
but when you do the video.
I like this better anyway.
No, but when you do the video, then what is your bandwidth go there?
Again, depending on what it is, it can be a couple hundred K. It's not that bad.
Doesn't
Again.
go over a megabit or so?
No. So yeah.
Can I ask that you repeat the question?
Pardon? I'm sorry. Yeah, I should be doing that. Sorry. For the audience out there as well. Where did we leave off? What box were we in?
Just go to the next slide.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So what have we learned so far? Well, we talked protocol is critical. We've talked a lot about the protocol. ICA is probably the most mature protocol on the market for doing this thing and does the best job. We did work with RDP for a while, and it just doesn't cut the mustard. Multimedia redirection is in USB redirection. You got to have these two things. If you don't, again, you can't run flash video. Users get really upset when they can't plug a USB drive into the thin client seat on their virtual desktop. So you've got to be able to do USB redirection. Those two things came via TCX. Printer driver management is a problem. If you've ever done anything with a Citrix environment, a Citrix presentation environment, you got a guy who wants to plug his printer in or wants to print to a printer. There is no universal print driver, and so that's one of the things we've learned is that printer drivers, dealing with printer drivers is going to be a problem, as well as offloading. Again, offloading the video processing. So.
It's a paperless office, no printers.
Yeah, unfortunately, you can't claim a paperless office. That doesn't work. Yeah.
Can you touch on that real quick? How does the hardware doing all this virtualization attach to local utilities like a printer? The printer's got to be in his office.
That's the USB redirection. That's the TCX protocol.
Okay.
So yeah. I can take again this box here, be wired up or be hooked up through our portal that we go through in order to get into the environment. Plug a USB drive in here, and it shows up on my desktop in my in virtual.
Not necessarily connected to the computer; it's connected to the local network, right?
That depends. If it's a local network printer, then the virtual machines can see all the network printers.
He would see maybe many printers.
Right. Yeah, he'll see every printer that's attached to whatever print servers you have out there. Now, it's the local printer that's the issue. And in our environment, management staff is required to have a local printer in their office to do printing of personnel type stuff. They're not allowed to print that on the network printer and then run out and try to grab it before the next guy gets it, right? So we have to solve that printer problem in order to be able for this environment to work. Running separate images is cost prohibitive. We run a single image. If you get into, now you could probably run 2 or 3 different images, or you could run 2 or 3 different operating system images if you chose to, but you can't run a separate image for every individual you have in the company. I mean, you might as well go back to a regular fat client, right? There's no point in doing that. So you have to get down to a single image. If you're going to use a single image, you have to do application virtualization, because not every user has to have every application. Licensing would kill you if you put every application into that image and then stream that image out. Plus, that image starts getting rather big, and it takes longer for the client to boot up. So, there are application virtualization integration issues. You have to think about what it is you're going to do when you do the application virtualization. If the application has a lot of hooks into other applications, you have to virtualize the package. You cannot just take the single individual application. One example is I use a tool called OneNote. I had them virtualize OneNote separate from my regular desktop, and OneNote runs fine, but it doesn't know anything about the fact that Microsoft Office is there, so I can't use any of the integration between the two. Okay. Somebody asked about the hypervisor or the mobile user. You can't support a mobile user in this environment. Okay. So when I get on, if this is the only machine that I have, when I get on the airplane, I can't do anything with this machine until I get to where I can get to a network and get back into the environment. All right, there's no way to support a mobile user at this point in time. Data center impacts. Okay, you deploy this in a big way, you are going to impact your data center. You're going to put more servers in the data center, which means more electricity, more cooling, more storage, all those types of things. So those are things that have to be taken into account when you go in. What's next for us? We are going to spend this year looking at VMware View 4 and Zen Desktop 4. We're working with a couple of the other business areas. They're rolling out big pilots of this stuff. We're just going to kind of scan onto what they're doing to see how well it's working for them. PC over IP is a new protocol. It's based on some work that's done by a company called Teradici. What I've seen so far in the labs and stuff is pretty impressive. However, the problem with Teradici early on was it was like a one-to-one relationship. You had to have one piece of hardware in your client and one piece of hardware in your server, and those two could talk to one another, but that was it. They've now got to the point where they actually have a software client that will run against hardware, and you can have a many-to-one relationship. We'll spend some time looking at that. If it works, then it eliminates the need to do the USB redirect and the video offloading, multimedia redirection goes away because they handle all that inside their protocol. Type 1 hypervisors for mobile users. This is how we're going to deal with the mobile user, or attempt to deal with the mobile user. There are a couple of Type 1 hypervisors currently available today on the market. We've spent some time looking at them, but they're, I don't know, I call them pre-alpha. You can't manage them. There's some real issues with them, so we will spend some time looking at that. We have to solve the mobile issue user. We are taking our application virtualization production, our application virtualization that we did last year, we are moving it into production. We're comfortable enough with it today that we can move it into a production environment. We have a 16-bit application that runs the shop floor in one of our other locations in California. We can't get rid of it for 2 more years. Typically 16-bit applications don't like to play inside Vista. That's the environment they're moving to. We've been able to take this commercial tool, take the commercial application, wrap it inside of ThinApp, and deploy it out to 1,600 desktops with no problems. Runs in that environment. Yes, sir.
From the time that you get a request to put a new application online, to the time that it's actually delivered, something like Google Earth, let's say you get a request from Google Earth, it's approved. How long is it from the time that you start to the time that you can actually deploy on that?
Depends on the application, depends on how the consultants answer, right? Depends on the application, depends on how integrated it is with other things. So Adobe, for instance, Adobe Reader, which doesn't really integrate with a whole lot of other things. We can take a brand new version of Adobe from the point in time we get it to the point in time we can start rolling it out. It's about 4 hours. Okay, and that just depends on how busy the guys in the image lab are. Okay, and we've had to do that on numerous occasions, obviously, with all of the patches that have been released for Adobe. It was an interesting thing that I meant to mention earlier with Adobe, and I took a patched version of Adobe and gave it to the forensics guys and said, I want you to run every piece of malware that you have, a PDF-based malware that would whack an Adobe user.
Are they done yet?
Yeah, they finished with everything we had, okay? But basically, we ran all this stuff inside of a virtualized Adobe application. The net effect is that every time you ran a piece of malware that was bad, it did blow up the virtualized application, but none of it leaked into the operating system. So there were no hooks set in the operating system, none of that stuff. So it is at least with Adobe, it's a good way to know that you've got a piece of malware because Adobe blows up, but you also have protected the operating system and the machine itself. None of the badness leaches out into the machine. So, yeah. Okay. And finally, we also are going to spend some time looking at remote desktop services for Windows 2008. There's a lot of stuff that's been put in here that we were interested in looking at in terms of it's the stuff that we've had to do third-party applications for and that kind of stuff to bolt onto the existing infrastructure in order to be able to do some of the stuff we need to do. A lot of that stuff has showed up in 2008 R2. It may appear to be sort of a step backwards because that is a presentation virtualization versus a desktop virtualization scheme. I don't know. We'll take a look at it, see what happens.